Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Alan here. Alan, you're somebody that's been, one of the most impactful people in the legal system in America for quite some time. I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
I'm happy to be interviewed by you.
Early on, how did your passion for law, begin to develop?
I had no choice. That's all I could do. I was a terrible student in elementary school and high school. I finished 39th out of 47 in my high school class and was told I wasn't college material. But I always was good at arguing and made it by the skin of my teeth into Brooklyn College, where I didn't finish 39th out of 47th. I finished first among the men. In those days, they had different rankings for men and women because of the draft. So I was first among the men and like 16th or 17th among the total class because the women were smarter than the men.
Huh. So you had this opportunity pretty early on to be involved as a professor at Harvard Law School. You're part of the faculty, I think, at 25. How did you get that opportunity? I mean, you were so young.
Well, I went to Yale Law School then, and I also finished first in my class at Yale Law School, and I wrote a lot of articles. That was unusual for a student. I wrote 3 law review articles in my second and third year, and it came to the attention of the Harvard faculty, and they invited me to come up and join the faculty at 25. So who were older than I was in my first few years of teaching, and I've had the privilege of teaching some of America's great leaders over the 50 years that I taught at Harvard. It was a great privilege and and pleasure, but Harvard has become a very different place today. And today, I don't know what I would be doing as a professor there. I think I'd be fighting with a lot of the students all the time because I have very strong views. I usually don't have those views in the classroom, but outside the classroom, I certainly feel free to express my strong feelings.
Mm-hmm. So you talk about how like your big break was working with the U.S. Court of Appeals. There was an opportunity there. Why was that so impactful to getting you to the place that you are now?
Well, being a law clerk, I was a law clerk both on the United States Court of Appeals and on the Supreme Court, is usually a route to teaching. And also, I was very lucky. I clerked for 2 very, very prominent judges, both of whom were Jewish and very liberal. And they encouraged me to be a teacher. Justice Goldberg actually wanted me to go into the government and work for Bobby Kennedy. And I was offered a job, but I decided to start teaching at a young age. Don't know whether that was the right decision or not, but it's what I did.
But looking back at it, like that, I mean, that is what worked out well for you, teaching there.
Who knows what the alternative would have been if I had gone to work for Bobby Kennedy and worked in the Kennedy administration. Of course, it ended very quickly, and then maybe I would have been in the Johnson administration. But I've never been in politics. I think I'm too independent, and I don't like bosses. And at Harvard, there were no bosses. Every professor was free, and I got tenure when I was 28. So I knew I had a full-time job, and I took advantage of that and expressed my views and did a lot of controversial writing. I wrote over 1,000 articles and 54 books, and lots and lots of cases. So I've had a very full a career with lots of controversy. And I've enjoyed not every moment of it, but most of it.
So how did you find the time to write all these books and articles?
I'm very efficient. I don't waste time. It's interesting because when I was in elementary school and high school, there was a Yiddish word that the rabbis used to describe me. They said I was a batlan. A batlan who wastes time. And they thought I was a batlan because I would sneak out and go to Brooklyn Dodger games at Ebbets Field, and go to the movies, and I would play a lot of basketball, 3-on-3 basketball. So I was a batlan, but I was never really that. I always was very efficient. I just had different priorities when I was in high school and elementary school, and my priorities as a professor was to write and litigate and do as much as I can. So, I've done a lot in my life, and I also, I love my family. I spend a lot of time with my children and grandchildren. So I just don't waste time. And I think the same thing is true of my children and grandchildren. They have been very successful as well academically. 2 of them are doctors. Two of them are in the show business. One of them is a lawyer for the Women's National Basketball Association. We don't waste time. We're very efficient, and we use our time effectively. And so I'm 85 years old now, and I plan hopefully to write 5 more books.
Wow. Are there like certain techniques that you have that like enable you to really control your time well?
No, I wouldn't say so. No, I'm not a person of techniques. I write when I feel like writing, and I guess my only technique is everything I write, every book I publish, I think of as a first draft. So I don't mutcher over the books. I don't obsess over them. I don't rewrite them 15 times. I'm not looking for perfection. I really do believe the cliche that perfection is the enemy of the good. And I try
Huh.
to write a good book. And if I don't like something I wrote in it, I'll revise it in my next book. I think that's a technique that's been helpful to me, thinking about everything as a first draft.
Interesting. So you've taken on so many interesting cases throughout your life. Are there limits to who you would want to work with if they've maybe done something that is pretty wrong? Like, will you not, what are kind of some of the limits in terms of the cases you would take on?
Well, most of the limits have to do with lawyers I won't work with. I won't work with unethical lawyers. And there are an enormous number of unethical lawyers out there, extortionists who don't care about what the law is. They just threaten people and get rich doing it. I won't work with them. I've been asked to work with lawyers and to use just my name and reputation to help get money. I just won't do that. So there are lawyers I won't work with. Clients, I don't ever represent people who are involved in continuing criminal conduct. That is, I won't represent somebody who is a mafia chieftain or a terrorist who's continuing to do terrorism. But if anything is a past crime, even if it's murder, I've represented murderers, mass murderers. I think the job of the lawyer is to represent the most unpopular and the most, in some respects, the most guilty, because they're the ones who often can't get a fair shake. So I don't have limitations of that kind.
So, like, how do you look at it this objectively? Like, when you take on, let's say, a client who's has done evil things, how do you objectively defend them when you know what they've done is wrong?
Well, I don't let them testify. I don't let them lie on the witness stand. I think of myself as an emergency room doctor. If the head of the mafia gets taken into the emergency room with a heart attack, you don't let them die. You treat them, even though you know if you cure them, they might go out and do it again. We each have a responsibility. The same thing would be true of a priest or a rabbi. They don't turn down giving spiritual guidance to somebody who's done something bad. So I don't associate myself with the bad things that a person has done. I limit myself to the legal issues and the constitutional issues, and I've done that quite successfully over the years. I've had clients who are despicable, who I won't have any contact with other than what's necessary to go to court. But I'm sure the same thing is true with doctors.
Interesting. So, you spent a lot of your life defending individual rights. Why do you care so much about the rights of an individual?
I guess because I grew up during the Holocaust, and I grew up in a neighborhood of Holocaust survivors, and I realized how much deprivation of rights have occurred in the world. I also grew up during McCarthyism, not to compare McCarthyism, obviously, to Nazism, there's no comparison. But I grew up in a neighborhood, in a community, in a family that always believed in defending the underdog. And I've tried to do that. I do half of my cases more now, but at least half of my cases and causes pro bono over the years. So I don't get rich doing it. I do it out of passion. People misunderstand. If I defended Donald Trump, they think I supported Donald Trump. No, that's not the case. Or if I defended Jeffrey Epstein or Klaus von Bülow or O.J. Simpson, they think I'm their friend. So it's not the situation. I'm defending their legal rights.
Interesting. So, early on, I think you grew up in, I think, an Orthodox family,
Right.
and then you had your own kind of, path you figured out with religion. But you still always cared, I think, about Jewish causes. Like, why are Jewish causes so important to you? You're known as a great public Jewish defender.
Well, I think Jews are still the most oppressed and discriminated people historically. And it's becoming, of course, worse and worse and worse now, particularly on college campuses. So I think my concern about defending Jews has been vindicated tragically by Hamas and by the Hitler Youth, that we now see on so many college campuses, radical, extreme anti-Semites who block Jewish students from coming to class, who discriminate and who call for the death of Jews, death of America, death of Israel. It's the most pervasive form of discrimination and the least well recognized. Universities, for example, today care much more about anti-Black, anti-gay discrimination than anti-Jewish discrimination. So I'm very proud of my role as somebody who stands up for Jewish rights. We're starting a small organization of lawyers. I've got 25 or so volunteers already. An organization which we have tentatively entitled Hurt a Jew, We Sue You, and to make sure that you don't just go around bashing Jews on the streets of Brooklyn or in university campuses, that we will exact consequences from you through our legal system.
So you were involved. I mean, you were at Harvard for many years. You saw how the school was changing. Were you surprised by the way that these presidents, testified, and the question, that famous question that Elise Stefanik asked? Were you surprised by the response there? Or was that what you were expecting?
Oh, it's exactly what I expected. I knew these presidents. They are opportunists. They care more about preserving the status quo than about principles or morality. And I saw this coming. Harvard had a great president some years ago, Larry Summers. He got fired because he spoke the truth. But other presidents who pander get hired. And so the response of the presidents didn't surprise me. What surprised me a little bit was how virulent some of the student hatred was toward Jewish students. And it came not all, but too much from minority students. It came too much from Muslim students and African American students, and surprisingly from gay students. Gays for Gaza. It's like, turkeys for Thanksgiving or chickens for KFC. The idea that gay people would oppose Israel, which is the most gay-friendly country in the Middle East and one of the most gay-friendly countries in the world, and to support Hamas, which murders gay people, shows the depth of anti-Semitism among some radical people on the hard left.
What do you think it's going to take to actually fix this anti-Semitism problem on college campuses and with certain young people?
It'll never get fixed. It's a permanent problem. It has to be responded to, but it'll never get fixed. It's too deep. It became clear to me on October 8th. October 8th was even more dangerous day than October 7th. October 7th took 1,200 lives, 250 hostages. But October 8th showed the depth of anti-Semitism by organizations like Amnesty International, the National Lawyers Guild, some Black ministers and Black churches. This is before Israel ever fired a single shot or killed a single Gazan. The fact that Jews were killed brought out the anti-Semites, the bullies, and it got worse and worse and worse, of course, as Israel fought back. But you can't look at this without looking at the 8th of October, before this happened, but after the Hamas terrorism, and how much the terrorism turned people against Israel and against Jews.
So, when President Trump, when he had the impeachment charges, you were pretty well known to be a Democrat. You supported Hillary Clinton, and then you decided that you were going to go, even though you didn't agree with him politically, and defend him there. What was that experience like for you? I mean, how did your life change at that point? There were certain friends I think you might have lost. Maybe you gained friends. What was kind of that experience like?
Dramatically. We lost all of our friends on Martha's Vineyard. Martha's Vineyard became the center of the new McCarthyism. People who I had helped their kids get into college, Larry David, for example, I helped his daughter get into college. I helped him in numerous ways. He turned against me, called me disgusting and disgraceful. Many of our old friends on the Vineyard would have nothing to do with me. And they went after my wife, and they went after my children. And it really showed the extent of McCarthyism on Martha's Vineyard. Recently, my wife and I went to see a great play on Broadway, An Enemy of the People by Ibsen, about a principled man who tried to help a town, and everybody in the town turned against them. And it reminded me of Chilmark, Massachusetts. It's interesting. It depends where. In Chilmark, I can't walk down the street without people screaming at me and yelling at me and attacking me. On the other hand, I just came from Charleston, South Carolina, where people were very supportive of me. So It's regional, it's local, and it's ideological.
How do you handle all this now?
Well, I have a thick skin and I fight back. It's very hard, though, on my children, very hard on my wife, very hard on my family members. And, people just don't understand the role of criminal defense counsel. They thought they agreed with me when I defended people they liked. But as soon as I start defending people they didn't like, oh, we never should have admired you or agreed with you. And there are very, very few people in the country that really are principled and believe in the Constitution. Free speech for me and for thee, rather than free speech for me but not for thee. Criminal defense for me but not for thee. The vast majority of Americans, including intellectuals, just use constitutional rights to further their own ideological goals.
What do you think of the acquisition of Twitter, which became X, that Elon did? Like, in terms of the importance of preserving the Constitution and free speech, like how impactful do you think that was?
Well, I think it's very paradoxical. What we're seeing today is an expansion of free speech and then a contraction of free speech in some respects, even by people who are part of the expansion. And so we haven't yet figured out a way of dealing with the relationship between freedom of speech on the one hand and private ownership of the means of communication on the other hand. We're seeing the people who are supposed to be the beneficiaries of the First Amendment turning against free speech in some respects. And so it's a work in progress.
So, just on a little bit of a different topic, you're involved with the O.J. Simpson case. I mean, now he's passed away. Do you think that he wound up doing, what people reported he did? Like, what are kind of your thoughts on the situation?
I'll tell you a funny story about that. Bibi Netanyahu gets elected prime minister in 1996 or something. My wife and I are in Israel. He invites us to come and, say hello to him, take pictures. I had known him as a student. And he takes me aside and says, Alan, there's a question I've always wanted to ask you. I thought it was about Iran or about the Palestinians. He said, Alan, did OJ do it? And I said, Prime Minister, I can't tell you that, but I have a question I wanted to ask you. Does Israel have nuclear weapons? He said, hell, I can't tell you that. I said, I can't tell you that. We both have secrets. I can't tell. So I can't discuss my personal feelings about people's innocence or guilt.
Wow. So you really, this is your morals. You're holding to that ground.
Not only that, but the ethical rules of the bar preclude a defense lawyer from disclosing information that he learned from a client in confidence.
So, you haven't really announced, to my knowledge, who you're going to vote for in this election. What are some of the criteria that are the most important criteria right now that are going to determine who you'll vote for?
Well, for me, one of the most important criteria is who the president will be after the current president, after this election. And so I'm looking very hard to see who the vice presidential nominees are, because it's very likely whoever the vice president is will become the president, either because the president won't be able to fulfill his 4-year term or because he'll be the most likely candidate for the next nomination. So I'm looking at that a lot. I'm looking at how the candidates deal with Israel, civil liberties, choice in the environment, a range of issues. I'm traditionally a Democrat and presumptively a Democrat, but that presumption has become questioned over the past year. So Donald Trump said not so long ago, using me as an example, he said, Jews like Alan Dershowitz, if they vote for Democrats, have to have their head examined. And my response was, if they examined my head, they would find an open mind.
So you've been around Trump now. You've seen what he's like in person. How different is he in person than what the media portrays him?
Oh, he's very different. In person, he's much more charming and funnier and easy to talk to. But in public, he sometimes says the most outrageous things.
So there's been this position in the International Criminal Court that Israel is looking to fill for a new justice, and is because the recent one stepped down. Is that something that you think would be of interest to you to do?
Oh, no, I can never be a judge. Asking me to be a judge would be like asking, a ball player suddenly to become an umpire. I'd rather be the ball player. I'd rather take the shots. I'd rather be the litigant than the judge. So I've turned down opportunities to be a judge over the years, and it's not something that would ever interest me.
So, another one of the free speech, major cases that's been going on now is the Julian Assange one. You were involved with him earlier. What do you think should be the end result there in terms of the extradition and other things going on?
Well, he shouldn't be extradited, but if he's extradited, he should be acquitted. He didn't do anything wrong. He did. He was the New York Times. He wasn't Daniel Ellsberg. Remember, there's a big difference between people who steal the secrets. Daniel Ellsberg, Chelsea Mann, all those. They're guilty of crimes. And the publishers who publish the material, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Julian Assange. So I think Julian Assange should be treated the way the Times and the Washington Post are treated, not as criminals.
We'll see what happens there. I don't know if that will happen. So, Alan, just kind of the last question that I have. At this point in your life, and you've done a ton of different things. You've written, like over 50 books, multiple bestsellers. You've had a major impact on the way laws, is today in the United States. What do you want to accomplish now? What are maybe some of the short-term and long-term goals that you have?
I want to see peace in the Middle East. If there's anything to do to contribute to that, I would. I'm writing a book called The Preventive State, which is essentially my magnum opus. I'll be 86 when it's published, and I'm hoping that book will have an impact on the way we think about law. It's a book I've been thinking about for many years, and I finally got to writing it and putting it all in between hardcovers, and so I'm looking forward to that. And I want to, spend more time with wife, family, and having long walks in the park. But I don't think I was ever put on earth to have long walks in the park. I think I was put here to fight back and to seek justice. And, my bar mitzvah sedra was Shoftim, judges. And the great line in Shoftim is, Tzedek, Tzedek, Tirdof, justice, justice, must you chase after. And I've been chasing after justice for all of my life, and I hope to continue to do it for the rest of my life.
Sounds good. Well, Alan, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. I think there's a lot young people can learn from you and how you've stuck to what you believe and the morals that you have. And I'm excited to see what you'll do next, and hopefully how you can help bring peace to the Middle East.
Well, thank you. You asked me some great questions, and I'm sure you'll have a great career. So thanks for including me among your guests.